Hi everyone, this is Gaurav, and in this video I'll be explaining what a null array is and why do you get a null pointer exception when you try to access either the length attribute or an item in a null array. So let's begin. Now your classic array is an array represented by a square bracket, so it doesn't have to be an integer array. It can be a double array, a character array, or a boolean array, and so on and so forth. So it can be of any type. For simplicity, we are just going to take an integer array, name it taxi cab, and the contents of this array are 10, 70, 20, and 90. What this means is that there is an array instance which has 4 items, so it's reserved somewhere else in the memory along with the length attribute. So in that memory block there are 5 values actually. The first one being length attribute, which is 4, and then the remaining 4 items, which are 10, 70, 20, and 90. You can display the length of the array using the length attribute, so that's taxicab.length, and you will get the value 4. I can also concatenate a string with this value, and now it says length is 4, which is good. I can also display the items of the array. So the first item is represented using index 0, and the last item in this case is represented using index 3 because the number of items is 4. Although I highly suggest when you want to access the last item, don't use constant values. Instead use the array name.length take away 1. So the valid index range is from 0 to the length of the array take away 1. What's going to happen if you try to access the item at index -1? It will give you an array index out of bounds exception, as you can see. It also tells you where that error or exception occurs. Similarly, if you try to access the item at taxicab.length, it will give you array index out of bounds exception, and it says the index 4 is out of bounds. So far so good. So if you have an array which refers to an actual instance, then you can access the length attribute and the items of the array. Now you can also have an array I'm going to call it null array, which is assigned the value null. What this means in the memory is that there is a reference, but the reference doesn't refer to any instance like in the first case. The reference holds the value null, which is nothing. Which means when I try to display this null array's length, there is no instance, and therefore when I run this, I will get what's called a null pointer exception on line number 12. Similarly, if I try to access item 0, I will again get a null pointer exception. So typically speaking, when we write programs in Java, we should always check that the array is not null before we proceed to operate on it. So here's an example of a simple function. As I said, or as I have said in other videos, forget about public static. Now this function is supposed to compute the number of positive items in an array. The name of the array is data. So here is your Java doc. Let's close console. Return the number of positive items. Positive means more than 0 in the array passed, return 0 if the array is null. So typically you will get this a specific case in the Java doc, but even if you don't, you should check that before you write the function. So again, I'm going to write a simple JUnit test corresponding to this function. Obviously this is not in the scope of this video. So if my array is 10, 70, 0, 20 and 90, then there are 4 items. So the expected value is 4. The actual value is when I call that count positive functions on the array A, whatever that function returns. And I want that expected value to be the same as the actual value. Let's have another array B, which is this time null. Expected value is 0, and because I've already declared it, I don't have to re-declare it. Actual value is service.count positives on the array B, which is null. And again, I want this time the expected value and the assert value should be the same. And let's just run this test. And this test will fail because the first time we called the function on array A, expected value is 0, but the actual value was, the expected value is 4, but the actual value was 0. So let's complete this function, and what we have to do is go through the array. If the current item is more than 0, it means there is a counter which increases by 1, which means I need a counter initialized to 0 because we are adding things. Once the loop finishes, you can return that result. Let's rerun that test now, and now you'll see that I get a null pointer exception. It says cannot read the array length because data is null. Where does it happen? It happens on count positives line number 12. So this is where the exception is thrown when you're accessing data.length, and it is called by this line over here, service.countPositives on the array B, because B is null. To avoid these errors, before you do your thing, you should always make sure that you check what happens if the array is null. What should I do? In this case, if the array is null, we are returning 0 as per the specifications and not executing any of the remaining code. Rerun your test, and now you can see that the test passes. And that is how you handle null arrays. Thank you very much.